All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our sixth and final virtual seminar in the Housing 2.0 series. I'm so glad on this World Password Day that you were able to use the password and get into this seminar. There wasn't a password. Today's seminar is going to cover something that we've never gone in depth before though, however, and that is existing homes. We're going to talk about both the challenges and the opportunities involved when it comes to retrofits. Now, my name is Mike Lignan. I'm the Housing 2.0 Program Manager, and if at any point you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via the chat box over there in the control panel, or you can also email me. I'm going to put my email address in the chat box just a little bit later. You know who has the password to innovative housing? Sam Rashkin. He's formerly the chief architect at DOE's Building Technologies Office, but he is now focused on creating and teaching the content for the Housing 2.0 program. That content is based largely on Sam's latest book, Housing 2.0, Disruption Survival Guide. The full program was established to help empower you, our building professionals, to design and construct higher performance, healthier, more sustainable homes at a fraction of the cost. Now, Sam's going to lead us through today's seminar, and he's also going to address your questions at the end. Now, before we get started, I wanted to let you know that there is no secret that our sponsors are pretty special. The first is Schneider Electric, who is driving the digital transformation of modern homes with smart and sustainable energy solutions for ultimate comfort and energy efficiency. Their connected home ecosystem of smart energy management solutions provides digital control of energy use throughout a home, from the grid via their smart electrical panel to their connected wiring devices. Next, we have Jinko Solar. They are a leading PV module manufacturer and energy storage system integrator. The company has deployed approximately 110 gigawatts of their Eagle modules in 160 countries globally, including more than 70 in the United States. Eagle Storage brings together the best energy storage technology for turnkey hardware and energy storage services. And finally, Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions is helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for home buyers. Now, during the course of today's seminar, you can submit questions for Sam. Use that questions box that's inside the GoToWebinar control panel. I'm going to review those questions, and I will pose those to Sam after his presentation. Now, all I have left to do is say the password, and we can get started. And that password is, here is Sam Rashkin.
And thank you so much, Mike. Welcome, everyone. Like Mike, I'm incredibly grateful to our sponsors. This is not your typical program. Housing 2.0 takes a much broader look than just high performance and zero, but how we take housing to the next level. And the vision of our sponsors to bring this to you makes us all grateful. So I want to move on today and actually for the first time, kind of move away from new homes and talk about existing homes. There are about 850,000 single family attached and detached homes built each year, but there are about 85 million existing single family attached detached housing that badly need to be taken to the next level. So we're going to talk about optimizing zero for existing homes, and the key highlight here is navigating the minefields. I don't think we talk enough about all the challenges in front of us to move to zero, and it's really important to understand them to do it most effectively and eventually scale. So here's the outline for today. As always, I always give a quick background about Housing 2.0, why, what, how, and we're going to jump into optimizing zero for existing homes. But first, we'll talk about kind of the ground rules. What are the basic building blocks for getting to zero? Just so we have a common framework for what we're trying to do, whether it's new or existing. And then as we look at existing, appreciate the minefields ahead of us, and then talk about how we navigate them so it can eventually scale to zero retrofits. And as always, we leave a discussion at the end for your questions. So let's look at what, why, how behind Housing 2.0. I always start with this data point, which is staggering to me, and look at where we spend our time each day and survey households all across the country. You come up with this kind of pie chart that shows we spend about 70% of our time in our homes as opposed to dining, outdoors, our car, all the other places we may be. And when you look at basically where we are after COVID, it's probably closer to 75% of each day Americans are in their homes. Home is where life happens. And that's just what drives me every day about what I try to do with all my programs. And when it gets to Housing 2.0, my core purpose for why that program exists are homes where life happens better. And essentially, we can't get there without performance and all the other experiences that we talk about in the program that you've been hopefully tracking in prior webinars. But if we just do one, performance, and that's the only experience we focus on, it'll be a pretty wobbly stool that probably won't stand up. So effectively with Housing 2.0, if we're going to make homes where life happens better, we have to address beyond performance, community design, quality and sales, which all work together with performance to create the full housing experience. That entails 160 best practices, and that's what we lay out in the Housing 2.0 program. Effectively, a roadmap for consistently delivering industry-leading user experience. How we do that is we shift from a first cost business model where we make fairly small investments in experts and special features to one where we're focused on the user experience. And we take advantage of short opportunities to delight the consumer by investing in experts and special features that are transformative in effect. And so we make those extra investments. But the secret sauce of Housing 2.0 is this very rigorous approach to moving away from traditional first cost construction to optimized construction, and where we leverage and extract tremendous amount of cost savings from simple, lean, quality, integrated systems, mass customization, systems built, all the concepts that we've been laying out in prior webinars. And we do that, we wind up with a net cost savings and all the added value from those improved user experiences. And what we show module after module of Housing 2.0 is that when we calculate all that added value and savings, it can be 30 to 70% of the cost of the home. So the third step is to translate that value, how we deliver better homes for lower cost. If we don't translate the value, then the market doesn't respond in kind with the right price signals. So this is what we do, and then also we collect empirical evidence. Here's one from a multifamily housing project by Walsh Construction, where after they built the first building traditionally, they went and applied user experience best practice techniques for optimizing design, and they achieved a 24% reduction in the cost in the second building compared to the first. In other words, 30 to 70% for optimizing all 5 experiences is based on a lot of empirical evidence. So one last thing is a key resource for Housing 2.0 is this new book. Even my grandson's on chapter 5. I think he barely looks, but he's staged a nice picture here. If you want to get the book, this is a URL for photographing to tap into our Green Building Media website to order the book. 400 plus pages, over 360 citations, 8 guest expert essays, hundreds and hundreds of graphics. It's really loaded with a lot of information, all curated into this framework so you can consistently get to zero at lower cost. So let's go right into the meat of today's topic, which is getting to zero for existing buildings. And we're going to start with the building blocks. So what really drives my understanding of the building blocks is first understanding the key challenges you face when you decide to build a high performance home. And the 3 key challenges I like to teach to. One is you have to optimize energy efficiency. Second, you have to manage all these risks that come along for the ride with high performance. And third, you have to ensure you're future ready. If you're going to build a home that is more comfortable, healthy, durable, you want it to last for as long as possible. And the best way for that to happen is for it to be future ready. So here's challenge number 1, optimizing energy efficiency. And the best way to look at this is I pulled this diagram from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory work they've done with a software system called BOP to calculate an optimized energy efficiency point for making improvements on the way to zero energy. And at the beginning on the vertical axis, you see the energy related costs per year. It's usually the utility bills and the mortgage. And only the incremental mortgage can make extra improvements above the reference case, which in this case is a code home. So you have the code home which is all utility bills. And then that's point one, your reference case. And then you keep making energy efficiency improvements until you get to this bottom point two. It's the minimum annual energy cost on a path to zero net energy. So you keep making incremental improvements. You get to a point where you're bottom of the curve and you've made an additional investment in those measures, which is the blue additional mortgage, and you see a big reduction in utility bills. Now, there's lots of opportunities to keep getting benefits from efficiency. You keep making more, but the costs go up a little bit higher on both the mortgage and the utility bills. And until you get to point three, and that's a takeoff point where any incremental investment in efficiency, it would be more effective to invest in solar. So you can keep investing in solar to get to a point where you have no utility bills, you're zero net energy, but your mortgage may be higher than you were in the reference case, point one. But fortunately, the cost of zero keep coming down, and eventually you see we get to zero at lower cost than a code home. So this is what we try to do. In the process, we're optimizing the cost of the energy measures, the solar cost, the lifetime of measures, replacement costs, electric rates and charges and metering rules, all that's factored in. The trouble is critical true cost factors missing. When you make different choices, it will affect cycle time, the ease which systems integrate and effectiveness of the systems integration, the cost of quality and risk with different choices, and again, getting back to user experience, all the benefits that drive homeowner cost savings and homeowner value have to be factored in. So we don't get to the right answer just with a normal type of BOPT analysis. We have to be more all-encompassing. And in a few modules downstream here, we'll show you how true cost really can be really effective. The next challenge is the greater risk. When we have a low performance enclosure on the bottom compared to high performance enclosure on top, we have less insulation in the low performance enclosure and less air tightness. So we want it with a fairly significant amount of thermal flow and airflow through the assemblies. When we improve the insulation air tightness, we substantially reduce the airflow and thermal flow. And what that does in turn is on the inside face of the cold side of the assembly, we have a colder surface. And that's because the insulation and the air control are blocking heat from flowing from more to less, from the warm side to the cold side, so we wind up with a colder surface inside the cavity. And that creates greater moisture risk, first of all. There's more wetting potential. If it's colder, greater propensity to condensate, and if there's less heat getting through because of more insulation, there's less drying potential. And that's a very significant risk that has to be managed. On top of that, because you have such a superior enclosure with less thermal and airflow, you have what we call ultra low load homes with high performance enclosures. And that means in the duct system, you have much less airflow. When the data, as we'll show you later, is egregious in terms of the amount of challenges we have doing good duct systems. We have much shorter cycles because the sensible loads achieve so much more quickly, so we have less dehumidification. And we have longer swing seasons. The month on the front and back end of the cooling season might be shorter normally because of the greater insulation and air tightness. So with an additional month of no air conditioning in the front and back end, we have those 2 months where we don't have dehumidification accidentally as a byproduct of the air conditioning. So ultra low load homes need a lot of attention, and they also need a dedicated strategy for dehumidification. Finally, health. With much tighter construction, we're going to accumulate contaminants without the additional infiltration that occurs with leakier homes. So we need to manage dilution of contaminants that get into the home. So these are all the risks we manage. And lastly, on future ready, we have these hard trains. We know disasters are just going up exponentially in terms of both frequency and magnitude. When oceans are dramatically warmer, air temperatures are so much warmer, we have tremendous amount of physics that just create higher risk in terms of more vapor being absorbed into the atmosphere, more gradients between cold and hot fronts, all the conditions you need for droughts, for storms and hurricanes, for high surges of ocean waves coming across, all the things that create flooding, droughts, et cetera, are just so much more evident today. And so we have to be prepared for disaster risk. Water shortages are part and parcel of the droughts and the ever decreasing water supplies that we have. And the electrification transition is a full-on movement to all electric buildings that we're already in the middle of. So we have to be ready for those hard trends. So all this informs the building blocks for high performance. Why we do it is, again, high performance is part of the overall user experience imperative for how homes live better. And what we do is first step one, optimize energy efficiency. And it's no longer enough to be efficient. You have to be efficient and smart. Efficient and smart enclosures, equipment, and components. Write down the list. You do all those, you have high efficiency. And now you have to manage a greater risk. So you have to do all the moisture protection required for a much greater wetting potential and much lower drying potential. You need insured comfort for a low load home, and you need a comprehensive indoor air quality system for a buttoned up, extremely tight home. And finally, step three is you want to be ready for the future. Disaster ready, water efficient, and electric ready. So all those challenges create or inform effectively a real robust framework for what is high performance. Now, I've gone to look at all the definitions of high performance. I can't find one that really works for me. So I made up my own, and I forgot that I didn't put it in here. Basically, a high performance building is one that optimizes the assemblies, the enclosure, the components, the equipment for health, comfort, durability, safety, and it's just what we have to do in high performance. So moving on, now we want to apply this to existing homes. We've really done a great job in new homes. We have much more increased energy codes. We have tremendous success of various certification programs. The federal programs are Energy Star, Indoor Air Plus, WaterSense, and Zero Energy Ready Home. And then there are programs for green, for passive house. There are other certifications for disaster ready. So we have a whole array of programs out there for new homes. So what do we do with existing homes? And the first thing we have to do is understand they're very critical minefields. And it's not anywhere near simple and easy to do this. It's a myth that retrofitting energy retrofits are easy and simple. And there's all sorts of promotions and advertisements that will suggest this is easy. It's anything but. And so there are four key minefields I want to talk about. One is proper sequencing. Two is cost optimization. Three is a high friction transaction. And four is risk management. All these things are critical if we're going to get to scaling zero in existing homes. So in sequencing, if we were to do an existing home the right way, the first thing we would do is make sure it's safe and durable. And we look for real critical issues around moisture, around combustion safety, and so forth before we start to understand things that can really hurt the health of the family and potentially even kill us. Step two is then make sure before we do a whole bunch of things, tightening up the home and making it so much more airtight, that we ensure we have a fresh air strategy. Step three is make sure we have moisture control. We can't start insulating, creating cold surfaces if we don't have control layers. Then step four, then we can start air sealing for draft-free construction. And step five, then we can do the thermal insulation. And anywhere along the way, it's time to replace any equipment or components. It's great to make them energy efficient, and that's what you should do. Energy Stars are going to be your friend for so many of your choices, but you always upgrade energy efficient for anything that needs to be replaced. There are some other challenges where you may be oversizing. Let's say if you replace heating and cooling equipment, once you later on would make your house much more insulated and airtight, so we have to manage those related issues as well. But the minefield is that we find that people go so often out of sequence. They may throw in insulation in the walls before they have moisture control layers, and you're creating risk factors. So it can lead to wasted expense, wasted work, moisture damage, and indoor air quality problems. You've got to get the sequence right. Minefield number 2 is cost optimization. Now, there's a whole array of challenges with just the energy savings involving the accuracy of the modeling, a lot of the variations in utility rates, and whether the structure was time of use or not. Then the quality of field installation and what it really delivers versus what it promises to deliver. And then there are a whole host of different purchase fees for renewable power that utilities charge. And then there's the future value of energy savings, which are very challenging to figure out. The utility cost escalation, the discount rates, and finally, to be complete, the value of the non-energy benefits, particularly those that address affordability, wellness, future value. So we have all this going on, and we're supposed to come up with some way to optimize our investment. And it's a minefield because there's so many unknowns, uncertainties, complexities, and a tremendous amount of analysis gaps that we just don't address. Then the third minefield is high friction transactions. Normally with very robust, rigorous whole house retrofit programs, there's pre-work and there's an energy checkup. I never use the word audit. Those of you who went to my last session about sales and marketing, we talk about the power words, and energy audit's not a power word. You want to match your recommendations to your budget and get that as aligned as possible. You have to contract with trades, you have financing. There's a lot of burden on the homeowner. Then during installation, there's a lot of preparation, and then there's a lot of effort to ensure that the work's being done at high quality. And finally, commissioning, there's verification, diagnostics, and a lot of education that homeowners need to ensure persistence of the savings that are being added to the house. And the minefield is that these programs typically impose tremendous burden that's very complicated to manage, before, during, after construction, there's a lot we're asking homeowners to do. So this is really challenging. And the last one I'm going to spend the most time with, risk management. You know, everywhere you turn with the enclosure, with the heating cooling system, and with the indoor air quality, there are so many challenges. I mentioned the enclosure, typical construction, often, if not vast majority, don't have the right amount of moisture control layers, or even if it might be there, installed in a quality fashion. And then we have, it's very challenging getting comprehensive airflow control when you have so many of the cracks and penetrations and openings that are hidden by the existing finishes and trim and so forth. And then the quality installation of insulation is really, in the past, open to lots of challenges as well, and risk factors. On HVAC systems, design installation are notoriously lacking, and indoor quality, we know there are problems with moisture, pressure balancing, combustion safety, proper filtration, high capture levels, and increased radon levels in homes, and particularly after they get tighter, are risks being created. So the minefield is whole house retrofits expose homeowners to significant risks related to quality, work, completeness, future problems, wellness, safety, and persistence when they are not trained to really manage all this work. So let's move in to look at all of these risks: enclosure, HVAC, and indoor air quality. So starting with enclosure, a very common control layer missing is the double bond break weather resistant barrier when you have stucco cladding. Since stucco will bond to that first weather resistant barrier, the ability for stucco to drain is mitigated because of there's no airspace and gap for the moisture that's collected to drain. And stucco is like a sponge; it absorbs tremendous amounts of moisture. And so here's a house with stucco that's been pulled off, and you can see how much damage has been done because the bonding to just a single layer of weather-resistant barrier is not good enough. And it's even worse with stucco stone. That's like a giant sponge absorbing water. And again, the double break will often be missing, and that could lead to moisture damage like you see here. It can just virtually destroy the entire wall framing and sheathing system. So this is what we really need to make sure we have. this is a tremendous minefield in existing construction. Do we have that double bond break, 2 layers of building paper, wrap, whatever it may be, behind the stucco or the stucco stem? And that's where we have to get to. That's how we manage that risk. Then another big risk is when siding doesn't have an air gap between the cladding itself and again, the weather-resistant barrier. And so without the air gap, the moisture is trapped and again can migrate through and cause damage to the sheathing and the framing and so forth, as you can see in this case where the siding is being pulled off. So we just didn't install air gap spaces behind cladding and sheathing. And so this is a real problem when we go back and what do we do to fix these existing homes? So the risk management that you want to do, that's hard to do, is make sure you have a furred out space. All you need is about a 1/4 inch. You can use foam strips, or if you want thicker spaces, you can use wood furring. And you need that place where it's open at the top and the bottom, so basically the moisture can drain in case of infiltration, and 100% of claddings leak. So this is something that we have to manage risk. Now also older buildings, the repulls at the bottom of the wall with brick and stone cladding need to drain, and they get clogged and then the moisture is trapped inside. So this is another potential moisture risk in existing construction. Another big risk with moisture is we leave out simple details, like this is a roof adjoining a wall without kick-out flashing that can deflect the moisture away so that it doesn't just run behind the cladding. In this case, wood cladding, it gets rotted and moisture damage. So ideally, this is how we manage the risk. Particularly step flashing is an important detail, and the bottom piece of step flashing should bend, or there's special kick-out flashing you can buy just to add to step flashing, but you need to deflect the water away from the wall to avoid moisture damage. So very simple detail. And also, I find I'm always surprised how many roof systems, the edges of the sheathing are exposed to weather. So the drip edge flashing is missing at the sheathing on both the bottom edge and the side edge, which again can lead to the moisture damage like you see here, over here in the side and the bottom. So this, again, the drip flashing at the bottom and the side edge is a critical piece before you start putting on the membranes and the roof underlayment. You've got to protect the edges, which are very absorptive of water from weather. So drip edge flashing is real important. Now, another piece of flashing that's often missing is at the top of the ledger, where a deck bolts into a band joist construction. Often there's no flashing, and that can lead to structural failures like you see here. In fact, 33,000 plus people were hurt by deck or porch failures between 2003 and 2007 from one study. And this is just something that homeowners would never know to watch out for. So this is a detail you need. You need, when you have a ledger and you're bolting in, you're bolting it into the band joists so you can hang the framing for the deck, you need to have a flashing piece come from underneath the underlayment for the cladding over the top of the ledger so the water has a way to drain and go away from the structure. So this is just a critical detail you have to have. I'll often inspect homes and find these screws are pretty loose and already rotting out, and you have a problem. The next risk is energy loss due to air leakage in existing construction that typically has too many cracks, holes, and openings that are not sealed. And if you look at air leakage as a percent of the total energy loss in cold climate homes, it's 3 times the loss of the walls, ceiling, and windows and doors. Each of those are about 11%. Air leakage is about 33%. So this is a big risk. Air leakage is such a significant impact on energy loss, and there's very limited access to repairs to reduce it as much as we would do in new construction. The second reason air leakage is such a critical issue is it's the main source of vapor transport for creating moisture risk. So in a hot climate on the left, over an entire summer cooling season, you have going through a 4x8 sheet of drywall of the water just by diffusion. If we simply add a little bit of air leakage, a 1-inch hole in that 4x8 drywall, we have 7 quarts of water, 10 times more vapor flow to a potentially cold surface where it can cause moisture damage with a leaky construction than without leaky construction. It gets worse in cold climates. During heating season, 1/3 of a quart of water goes through by diffusion through that 4x8 sheet of drywall. When you add a 1-inch hole, 30 quarts or 100 times more vapor transport with air leakage than without. So beyond the energy losses, air leakage is critical to manage for moisture issues. And if we're going to start adding insulation, we have to manage the extra risk. And when it comes to how much insulation to put in assemblies, it's pretty hard. Well, I mean, how much air leakage to get to assemblies? It's pretty hard to get to the latest levels that are targeted by the certification programs and the latest codes. So you see Zero Energy Ready Home, Energy Star, IECC, and Passive House here and their targets. And Zero Energy Ready Home is moving to version 2 this year, so the version 1 and version 2 targets. Energy Star is moving from version 3.1 to 3.2. You see those targets. You also see the target for 2012 to 2018 IECC and the new 2021 IECC. And then you have Passive House, which is 0.6 ACH50, which is incredibly airtight. So you have all these targets and you have all these different numbers where the warmer the climate zones 1 and 2 are the warmest, they have the highest amount of air leakage threshold allowed. And you get colder and colder than 8, you have the lowest amount of air leakage allowed. And so you have all this complicated different levels and different ways of construction rigor to air seal homes. I'm going to recommend you just do 1.5 ACH50 everywhere as a target, both for new and existing homes. Because beyond energy losses, again, airflow is critical to manage moisture damage. Again, it's a major source of vapor transport. And also you don't want contaminants getting from outside inside, mold, smog, dust, pollen, pests. And for disaster risk, it's much better to have an airtight home. Wind can get in, pressurize the house and create structural damage. Wildfire smoke can't get in the house and create health issues. For disasters and for health, for every reason, in addition to energy losses, you want to be airtight. And this is a big challenge in existing homes. To get this, it's hard enough in new homes. How do we do this in existing homes? So here's the checklist for air barriers to make insulation work. Every place you have insulation should be a 6-sided assembly if it's fibrous insulation, cellulose, fiberglass, rock wool. So there are lots and lots of air barriers that you need to install in a house. So this is a checklist for new construction. We have to make sure these are also in existing construction. And here's one example that you find so often is missing: air barriers at drop ceilings. So here's a drop ceiling, and you can see there's no air barrier where the insulation goes over the top of the framed out drop ceiling space. And there's no air barrier behind the insulation in the wall adjoining a garage in this case. So it's missing at both the sidewall and the top. And the reason it's missing is because fibrous insulation is a thermal barrier, but it's not an air barrier. And when you have more to less, second law pressures creating convection and air movement and so forth, the insulation itself won't be able to block it. So ideally, we would have, well, here's what happens when we do under these situations. If it's, let's say, winter 20 degrees outside and it's 7 degrees inside, what happens is there's hardly any thermal barrier between the drywall, between the framed out drop ceiling space with just the drywall and the conditioned space next to it. So let's say it assumes that temperature pretty quickly. However, it's 20 degrees in the attic, it's 7 degrees in that space. Now you have a 50-degree gradient, and you have no air barrier to block the driving force of more or less heat through the insulation. So you get heat going into the attic and then convective flows being created to eventually get a midpoint like 45 degrees. So when you have drop ceilings that don't have an air barrier, they look like this. In an infrared image, which this is, dark colors are cold, light colors are warm, and you see virtually a complete thermal bypass because of just one detail, the missing air barriers of the drop ceiling. And this is a home in Phoenix in winter. So we have to install this air barrier. And also recognize when we have this airflow here to the wall, we can have warm air meeting a cold surface and a moisture risk we don't want to have. So this is the air barrier we want, and yet they're missing in so many locations in the home. That whole checklist I showed you, so many of those are often missing when those details occur. And that can lead to high bills, comfort, and moisture problems. And a very difficult, costly to repair. So to go back and change a house without the air barrier is a real significant challenge. This is what it would be. This is what we see in new construction. You have an air barrier along the top. You have an air barrier along the side because this is a garage on the other side. All the joints are very carefully sealed. So you have a effective vapor control between the house and the attic. Now, air sealing is the same thing. We have a very detailed checklist of penetrations, cracks, and geometry that we have to address. And if they're not addressed, then again, we have significant energy losses, moisture flow, and so forth. So this is what we need to cover. I'll give you an example of just one that's very difficult, and one that you can manage actually in new construction. Where drywall meets a top plate at a wall adjoining an attic, the drywall itself will undulate quite a bit and create air pockets where air can flow, again, through the fibrous insulation when there's more or less heat or pressure or humidity. And so essentially, this is what it looks like when there's drywall and it's not sealed to the top plate. This again is a house in winter. The dark colors are cold. You see the cold attic is basically infiltrating into the conditioned space, which leads to significant high bills, comfort, and moisture problems. So again, this is something we want to manage. Now, new construction can do something about this one. We pull back the insulation, and we effectively insulate the entire footprint of the floor plan of the walls below adjoining the attic. And now on both sides of the wall, the drywall gaps have to be sealed. Expensive, but this is a way you can do it. Again, but throughout the house, you'll find there in existing homes, on exterior walls, there's a lot of rough openings that are not being sealed effectively, and the trim is covering them. And so the air sealing is missing very often, and it can lead to significant high bills, comfort, and moisture problems again. So this is a door opening, this is a window leaking. So all these are typical details in existing construction. And what's also very common is sill plates will have a gap between the foundation and the wood itself, the wood framing. And again, that's a serious source of air leakage. So again, it can lead to significant bill problems, comfort, moisture issues. So this is something that have to be sealed. In finished spaces, it will be covered, won't be accessible. So these are the real risk factors in existing construction. And also what's very common is outlets are very leaky. Again, you see an outlet that's doing two things. One, it has a lot of holes and places for leakage that aren't sealed commonly, and then it's compressing the insulation, creating gaps and voids, and convective flows for thermal bypass as well. So when you see an infrared image of a outlet or a switch, no, it's not uncommon in existing construction exterior walls to see some real thermal bypass. That can lead to high bills, comfort, and moisture issues. So when you can get the stuff, you can manually air seal it. But when you, if you're doing a gut rehab, or you have a way to basically get everything out of a house, another option is to use aerosol air sealing. What this will do is you basically pressurize a house. The aerosols released in the house will have maybe 6, 8 different nozzles all around the house injecting aerosol. And aerosol being, when a house is pressurized, will go to the very path of least resistance, which is every hole and crack and penetration. If it's less than 3/8 of an inch, it will basically lose velocity as it's going through the crack or hole and drop particles until it completely fills the cracks and holes. It means manually you have to do openings, cracks that are bigger than 3/8 of an inch. And so you have to have access to do that. But air sealing is a much more effective way of sealing an existing home because it's going to find its way, and it's just much easier than manual air sealing. And then the other risk is just the thermal bypasses that happen in the attic. The attic is the most egregious interface. Attics will be like 130, 150 degrees in summer, while it's 70 degrees inside. It's a huge temperature gradient because it's only maybe 90 degrees outside. Winters, attics will be as cold. And so again, you have a big gradient between inside and outside. And lastly, attics have so many holes, like a Swiss cheese of duct boots and vent openings and recessed lightings and penetrations and flues and holes for wiring and piping. Like I said, just Swiss cheese of lots and lots of details that have to be sealed. So here's a picture of a home in my neighborhood in winter, and you're not supposed to have a roof over a conditioned space where the snow is completely melted. Obviously, the thermal flow from the house is getting to the space, bypassing whatever insulation is there in air sealing, and mitigating the purpose of whatever insulation is there. So again, that can lead to significant high bill problems, comfort and moisture problems. So now I don't need an infrared camera here to see exactly what's going on. Thermal energy is probably getting through where the roof meets the wall at the dormers. There's lots of places for details not to be done correctly. Geometry, cracks, penetrations. And so sticking with the attic as an egregious interface, we wind up with a lot of things happening. We have that part interface, and we also have a condition when we insulate the attic on the flat ceiling, a completely missed air barrier on the top side of the insulation. Remember, insulation, fibrous insulation, needs a 6-sided air barrier if the insulation is going to work to its full potential. And so without the top side air barrier, we just keep making the insulation thicker and thicker to try to overcome the absence of that top side air barrier. And then we also stick heating and cooling equipment up there in the western states too often, and that's where you can get additional 40–45% losses from the heating and cooling system. So vented attics are really rough. And it's very easy for us to on a retrofit basis, create an unvented attic by spray foaming the closed cell foam on the slope. And since closed cell foam is an air barrier, you have both the air and the thermal barrier on all 6 sides. Now, if it's an attic, you also need an ignition barrier to spray on the foam or drywall if it's going to be a conditioned space. But switching to an unvented attic with closed cell foam at the slope will provide additional conditioned space or storage space, additional energy efficient performance, additional comfort, moisture control, plus the foam will strengthen the whole roof system. So in event of disasters, the roof is tremendously stronger because the closed cell foam adds like a substantial amount of strength. And when you get rid of the vents, you don't have air coming in and pressurizing the attic and creating structural stresses that can do damage. And so you have additional resilience as well. So that's a lot of benefits from switching from a vented to an unvented attic. Now, if you switch to an unvented attic, you have to condition it. You have to make sure moisture that will just collect in the attic is being treated. And so you have to still provide a supply and return in that space. And that's a mistake that's been made a number of times. If we don't get the thermal enclosure right, and if we don't have it done right, as I'm stating is the case in so many existing homes, now we know about it. And we know about it in an emotional way because infrared cameras can make us see the defect in a way that even a layperson can understand. And it's very emotional to see your house so defective in what it's supposed to be doing. We're stopping heat from getting in or heat from getting out, and having, in some cases, moisture that shouldn't be there. So this is a big reveal in existing construction. So what amount of insulation do we want? Here's the latest requirements for the 8 different climate zones. And I've laid them out for the 2015, 2018, 2021 IACC. And you can see the major difference among all these is the 2021 IACC on foundations requires slab edge insulation in climate zones 3, where it didn't exist, at a higher level in climate zones 4 and 5. It also adds options for continuous insulation in basements, but leaves the existing options also available. It bumps up the attic insulation to 49 in 2 and 3 and 60 and 4 and higher. But that seems very high, but if we do a unvented attic and insulate the slope, the 49 drops down to like 40 or 38, and the 60 drops down to like 49. So the unvented attic will also mitigate the amount of insulation, or reduce the amount of insulation we need. And most of the change of 2021 IACC is adding a little more rigor to the continuous insulation requirement in cold climates to make sure risk of condensation is better managed than it was in the older codes. So it's a really good code. It's where all the new certification programs are going: Energy Star, Zero Energy Ready Home. And it's something we need to aspire to in existing homes. And here's the risk we have. We have wall assemblies that don't allow the appropriate amount of insulation because they're too thin. And the insulation that's there is often has gaps, voids, compressions that are already making it tremendously less effective than the rated R value. And so we really have a lot of challenges meeting the latest energy codes. And then we have details that we can take care of right now. We have attic stairs that usually have no insulation, or this is a feeble attempt to squish in some fiberglass insulation between the steps. But again, the gaps, voids, and compressions will undermine maybe 50, 60 or more % of the value of that insulation. And so if we take infrared images of drop-down stairs, it's not uncommon just to see basically in the summer, they're based like a little radiator with the attic heat just coming right through that attic stair piece. And in the winter, it'd be cold. So significant high build, comfort, and moisture challenges. And then there are some ready-made products you can use, or you can make your own rigid insulated sheathing box that goes over the top of the attic stair to manage that risk. Now, the same thing with the attic hatch. You know, it's often missing insulation, or it's just flimsy piece of insulation that's put on that's not really doing that much. If that becomes a cold surface and you have hot, humid conditions, again, you can have mold and moisture accumulate on that attic hatch. And so we can try to do a better job with the fibrous insulation. I'll submit one on the left will probably get torn and ripped over time. My recommendation, the best bulletproof way of doing attic hatches is get the right size of the opening and get a small piece of SIP panel to be your attic hatch. It will stay long-term, persistent in its performance, work much better. The little additional weight will help it seal to a foam strip you put around the perimeter. It's a great way to manage your risk. And the other risk we have in the attic will also be the eaves themselves. You're looking right to the eave of the attic. You can see all the daylight coming through. There's no baffles, which are missing, which is supposed to allow the airflow across the top of the insulation. And then the insulation also gets very compressed at the eaves because the slope is very narrow there until it gets further up the slope. But the eaves, it's very tight. So it's not uncommon, again, if you take infrared images, we see like a thermal defect. In this case, it's summer, and the extreme heat at the edge is because effectively the attic eave insulation is almost non-functional. That leads to significant high build and comfort problems. All around the perimeter in this summer, it'll be hot, and it'll be cold in the winter. So this is the attic hatch. The wind baffle is missing. The insulation is very narrow at the eave, so it's very little, often it's squeezed in, so gaps, voids, compressions, that virtually are R-value killers. So the risk management you want to do is put in the baffle, and what I recommend is doing a closed cell spray foam plug around the perimeter just to get more R value and more persistence and no squishing and compression and gaps and voids. So any one bath on closed cell foam will take care of the eave enough to reduce most of the problem. And then the next thing we want to do is add, before the insulation, pull the insulation back, put the air sealing details, mention the top plate to the drywall around the entire floor plan, shafts, penetrations, duct boots, everything that goes into the attic, drop or raised ceilings, all that needs to be sealed. And then you can go put the attic insulation to the latest codes. And that way we can manage the risk of the attic. What you should notice about this, I call this kind of a comprehensive attic upgrade. You can do this in an existing home almost as easily as a new home. The attic is your kind of your sweet spot for what can you do everywhere that would have a meaningful, significant impact, not cause much disruption, not cause much friction, and be very cost effective. If there's any frustration I have watching all these existing home programs around the country, they go after so much harder scopes of work. If we just did comprehensive attic upgrades everywhere and created a whole infrastructure for doing that, it would work in every climate zone. It would be easy. It would be very low cost and very low friction. So I've always been pushing, we need a comprehensive attic upgrade initiative. And that could be a bridge to the whole zero energy approach. We'll talk about this more in a moment. Another big risk is we talk about all the defects in insulation in existing homes will occur at the band joists. They're often left without any insulation. I live in a neighborhood of 500 homes. None of them have attic band joists, and they're all two-story homes for the most part. And so it's commonly missing, and it can lead to high bills, comfort issues, potential moisture problems. Even when sometimes people attempt are made to install and just put in some fiberglass blanket pieces in there, the gaps, the voids of compression, and the absence of the air barrier are just creating more risk of high bills and comfort problems and moisture issues. This is just a horrible detail that will not work. And we get these kinds of infrared images. It's the number one reason for cold floors is the absence of the band joist insulation. And so very important detail to get right. When you have access to the band joists, or if you're going to do work with cut back the drywall, spray foam in the band joist is probably the only real option. Again, closed cell, so you get both the thermal protection and a air barrier. If I do open cell, closed cell foam, it's just going to allow the airflow through and potentially get to a cold surface. And we have those moisture risks. You have to do closed cell anywhere where you get cold temperatures. And this is what it looks like looking down a 2x4 wall assembly from the top. This is what we have is the gaps and compressions. We have effectively everything we need for almost a complete convective flow loop around the insulation. Because again, it's why gaps, voids, compressions, misalignment undermine 50, 60, 70% of the R value. And the misalignment, again, is the insulation's not touching the air barrier. So that's what can enable the convective flow around the insulation. And then we come back, and this is one of the main ways of insulating walls. And this is just asking for trouble. There's no control layers. And so we're going to reduce the drying potential. We're going to create all these cold surfaces at a higher level, and lots of opportunity for places where we didn't have moisture problems to now create moisture problems. So this is not a way we can do, in my mind, insulate wall assemblies. And there are a lot of other reasons this doesn't work. One is there's so much wood in wall assemblies. This is one home. I took a picture of its new construction. I mean, it's just almost unbelievable how much wasted wood there is. And this could lead to significantly reduced thermal protection because wood is 1/4 the thermal protection of the insulation. And then we have all the corners that have no insulation. Traditional construction before advanced framing was 3 stud corners, so the corners not insulated. And then at wall intersections where the interior wall meets the exterior wall, the 3 stud corner was also used. And again, we have all those uninsulated intersections. In advanced framing, we do a 2 stud corner. I'll leave the detail out for now. and ladder bridging across the gap between the studs where a wall intersects a space in between. And ladder bridging allows us to have nailing surface to nail the drywall in place, which is why those studs are there. So again, uninsulated corners can lead to significantly reduced thermal protection. Here's an example. This house has 40 inside corners and outside corners in the floor plan footprint on the first and second floor. 48 corners, 24 corners in each floor, so that's 80 feet of uninsulated wall. That's a lot of uninsulated wall. Then you have all the wood framing itself, which is probably about 20% of the wall. It's just, that's just too little insulation in climates that have significant weather. So now looking at basements, they're a huge challenge as well. They also account for 1/3 of the energy losses. Again, triple the losses from windows and doors, ceiling and walls, which are 11%. And but basements, before we finish them and make them more efficient, have significant moisture risks related to cold surfaces, leaky construction, clogged foundation drains, no under slab poly liner in older construction, and capillary breaks missing where the foundation stem wall meets the footing, which allows often moisture to kind of capillary action flow through inside to the basement. So this is a huge risk. This is what a foundation drain looks like after about 7 or 8 years. This could, the holes that let the moisture come in, let the sediment come in, and they clog in about 7 or 8 years. And so then you don't have the drainage around the perimeter foundation. In new construction, what we do is we wrap it in a fabric filter so the sediment can't get in. But it's too expensive to excavate, get to these drains, and repair them. It just costs prohibitive. So then we have older foundation construction methods that are inherently leaky. Stone foundations are porous, concrete block are somewhat better, but all these older methods can lead to significant moisture problems. And even in new systems with poured concrete, again, the stem wall doesn't have a capillary break between itself and the footing, and there's lots of ways for problems. So the key issue is moisture collects. If the drain tile is not working, it's collecting and collecting. It can go through the foundation, create water problems. So we have to fix these problems first before you even begin to think about finishing and adding thermal insulation. So you secure the walls, you have trench drains around the perimeter, sump pump, and drain it away. But these details have to be thought about before you're going to retrofit and add insulation and air tightness to these walls. And they're very cold. You have to watch vapor transport getting to that cold surface. Foundation walls are easy to condense. And the last part of the wall assembly that's really a challenge are the windows themselves. We can do a great job with walls, as you see here, which in a cold climate infrared image of a wall, they're working pretty well. No thermal bridging, very dark in color, so the heat's not coming through. And then you see the windows effectively functioning like a funnel, allowing heat flow at a very concentrated level through them. They really undermine the whole wall R value quite a bit, which can lead to high builds, comfort issues, and moisture problems. So I ran some calculations just to give you a sense of how impactful windows are. I assume 15% window to wall area. That's more common for existing homes. Newer homes are closer to 20 to 25% window to wall area. So all the percentages I'm going to show you get worse when you add more window. But if I have an Energy Star window, which is a U value 0.3, and I have 3 different wall assemblies, an R18 6-inch wall with insulation, R39 13-inch wall insulated, or R60 20-inch wall insulated, and I add that Energy Star 0.30 U value, the total wall R value drops from R18 with the windows to R11. So the windows cause a 40% reduction in the wall's effective R value. If I go to a 13-inch wall, more than double the insulation, 60% of the R value is lost. If I go to R60 wall, about 20 inches thick, it's R17 or 70% loss So you made this big investment in a really robust wall, and you're losing 60, 70% of the value. And what's really stunning, if I put a triple glazed window in a 6-inch wall, I get about an effective R15 almost, which is the same as a 13-inch wall with an Energy Star window. And the 14.5 is not that far from an R60 wall with an Energy Star window as well. Windows are really important in cold climates, and getting them right and finding ways to get to triple glazed as a when you replace the window, and looking at the value of the incremental cost, because it's going to affect the whole wall performance way beyond its individual U value. And there are these new thin triple lowy windows on the market that you should look out for, that have some really significant cost savings from conventional triple glaze windows. And since they use the same extrusion as a double glazed window, because they use like LED glass in the middle rather than a full thickness glass, they're lighter and easier to replace, and they often will fit in the same framing spot as the existing dual glaze window or single glaze window. So, so the way we manage risk when we have windows is a big funnel. We use Energy Star certified windows in warm and moderate climates. And we're recommending cold climates you go beyond Energy Star and use the triple glazed windows, which will also be Energy Star rated, but they'll be Energy Star Plus. And then comes the next big issue with windows. Typically, they leave the sash and frame around the window. They leave the frame around the window, they pull the sash, they pull the window itself out, and they put in the new window in the existing frame, which means you never get to the rough opening, which are usually not sealed or foamed, which are really significant thermal losses around the perimeter. A rough opening could be a ½ inch or more around the perimeter with no insulation or air sealing in older construction. And it's covered by the trim, and it's hard to get to, and this can lead to comfort and moisture problems. We're leaving all that construction in when it's embedded with poor air leakage and no sealing. And so we also see pictures like this, 100% of windows leak. And if a wall is getting wet, you might be lucky that it's drying because it's not being insulated right now. We can't insulate this wall until we figure out how to get the moisture control layers that mitigate the moisture problem first. Remember, the sequencing is so important. And we lead to these kinds of problems when you have these leaky windows. Dry rot, moisture, mustiness, mold, all these things can happen. Now, the cost of pulling back vinyl siding or wood siding or brick siding and putting in all the flashing details you need is what you have to do to get it in, but really incredibly costly. So we'll talk about what we do about this later when we scale how we get to zero. But if we're going to do it right, and this is the way we do new construction, our air control layer, which is a house wrap, is modified eye cut. You go down the middle, in the bottom, it's kind of a slope cut. You fold in the bottom, you fold in the sides, you pull up the flap at the top, and basically what you do is you install the window and pan flashing, most importantly. Typically, you'll put in a shim piece so it slopes to the outside so water that's in there will drain. And then this could be a flexible piece, or it could be a piece of metal pan flashing. But you have a way to drain the windows when 100% of windows drain. The corner is where most risk is, so you want a lot of attention to the corner detail. And then you install the window, but you got to put caulking and sealing only around the top 3 sides, not the bottom, so moisture can flow out the bottom. Then you put in the window and fasten it. You put in the side flashings over the bottom flashing. You put in the top flashing over the side flashing, and then you fold the top down and tape it. It's basic shingle fashion approach to flashing. We do every flashing detail. So the risk management strategy you have is wait till it's time to replace the cladding to replace the windows, and remove the entire window assembly and install the flashing that's missing. Possibly you're missing the weather resistant barrier as well, and get this detail right. We'll talk later how to scale a solution work cost effectively later. Another issue with window is sometimes we just didn't think through details. Very often we'll see windows where we don't have adequate clearance for flashing. if you even want to do it and invest the cost. Just the space is not really adequate to install it. Similarly, if you have a window right into a corner, we don't have adequate clearance to install a flashing detail. Remember, the corner is the most critical. That's why you see all this discoloration and problems right here. It's just a horrible architectural detail. You want windows to have much more clearance than this. So today, after what I'm going to show you later, the only way is brute force. You can pull all the cladding. You can put in new windows. You can put in new weather barrier. You can put in new continuous insulation. And this is a big deal. And really costly, probably cost prohibitive, absent from incredible subsidies that might come along. I don't think we need the subsidies. I'll talk more about that later. And here's another way Uber zip sheathing is it's a sheathing surface that's bonded to insulation. So you have the nailing surface, you have the weather resistant barrier, and you have the thermal protection. So you can put that, take out the window, put that over the existing wall, and then put in the new window with the flashing, and you have basically your control layers, and you have the new windows, the new cladding. So again, this is what you can do, but these are expensive propositions to do these kinds of solutions. And one thing that you don't see this talked about much, but I think it's still pretty important to recognize, is that low-E windows, basically, when the heat comes on them, they expand and they get curvilinear, and they tend to almost be like a prism focusing sunlight. And so if you have an adjoining building, that could be the brunt of that reflected solar energy, you can wind up with this kind of damage. So one quick note, you have to check your site conditions and make sure your low-E windows, if you're going to install them as new double efficient dual glaze windows, are not going to damage your neighbor's walls and create some litigation for you that you don't want to get into. It might mean on windows adjoining, which will reflect on an adjoining home, you might have to use clear glass or think through these issues. I have one photograph of the sun just beating down on a propane tank valve, and it's not pretty. And then we get to HVAC. We're finally done with the enclosure. On HVAC, this should scare everybody, but it's something we've known for a long time. National Renewable Energy Laboratory went out, looked at a large sample of homes with HVAC systems and found 70–80%, 70–100% of the field measured systems had at least one performance compromising fault. And some of these numbers are really, really scary. Equipment oversizing was 30–90+%. Refrigerant charge too low was almost 30 to almost 80%. Duct leakage in 2/3 to 100% of the homes was excessive, and airflow through the duct system was too low in 50 to over 90% of the homes. So, to go to zero and have this kind of infrastructure in the house won't work. Your HVAC infrastructure has to be really good at mixing and airflow and no duct leakage. So all these things have to be figured out, integrated in a comprehensive getting zero energy retrofit project. So this is the HVAC system. It's got refrigerant lines, blowers, and filters, and duct work. And the risks are that you have poor comfort with improper charge, poor comfort, moisture problems, leaky, and poorly installed ducts, poor humidity control with oversized equipment, poor infiltration or airflow with a 1-inch filter rack, and excessive dust with leaky ducts and leaky filter racks. So there's a lot going on here. Remember, a lot of minefields in existing homes. We really have to figure out what to do. And we'll talk about this again and how we scale it. And so, these pictures are just too common. Poor design installation of existing equipment and ducts can lead to high bills, comfort, and moisture problems. This is a compressed duct being squeezed through a truss joist, so your flow is going to be tremendously reduced. Remember, this is a flex duct, which is very insulated. That duct's getting compressed very significantly, and so very poor comfort in the rooms that it's going to. Here's some common leakage details you'll see. I've inspected too many duct systems, and the culture was just these things didn't matter for such a long time. And it can lead to, again, reduced airflow, moisture problems where warm air can get out and hit a cold surface, Often these are inaccessible if they're inside some construction assemblies, which creates other risk factors. Here's just some duct systems that I've inspected. On the left, you can stick your fingers in that flex duct. On the right, the installer was trying to get away with not only sealing 3 sides of the metal duct. The top side here is no mastic was installed, just I'll call it laziness, but this is just the culture of the HVAC installation infrastructure that was really systematic for just decades and decades. And so if you want to seal existing ducts, so again, there's an aerosol system for sealing ductwork as well. It does require, again, sealing the big problems manually first, and then you can really do an incredible job sealing your own ducts and getting them very tight. Otherwise, you're stuck with just manual duct sealing. And then there are kink ducts, which will also just virtually stop airflow and mitigate the purpose of the duct itself. And often these can be inaccessible for easy repair. Also, straps are also missing in ducts, supposed to keep them from having significant bends that constrain airflow. So the straps just completely missing here. And here's a duct going from point A to point B. So this is where the metal duct stops. The insulated flex duct is here and has to go here. Flex duct comes in 25-foot length. So the installer said, I don't want to cut this stuff. And boy, and that's what it takes to get from that point A to point B. And I'll be surprised if there's much of any airflow that gets there. So it can really compromise comfort and performance. And then the other big issue is, as we have gone primarily to central hallway returns rather than room by room returns, we could wind up when the doors are shut, blowing air into bedrooms, let's say, which doesn't have a path out to the central return with the door shut. So once that the bedrooms get very pressurized, you see the plus symbols. Meanwhile, the central return is pulling full force and doesn't have access to the entire space that it's sized for. So you have very significant negative pressure in the remaining space that's left. And so what happens, 2 things. One is the positive pressure in these rooms becomes a block for airflow or comfort in these rooms. And the positive pressure can push airflow into assemblies in wintertime conditions where it can reach cold surfaces and creates extra moisture risk. So what do? We got a problem. And sometimes it'll evidence itself just where you see the carpet's acting like a filter as the air is trying to get under the door and out to the central return. And sometimes visibly you'll see what's going on. You even see under the sill plate, air trying to get out. I mean, the room is really pressurized. So transfer grills and jump ducts are the way we manage that risk. We do these in new construction, and these are not that hard to add in existing construction. So particularly when we have evidence that we got problems, these are kinds of solutions we have at our disposal. Then comes IAQ, and indoor air quality is always right there in part of any kind of high performance home package in terms of concerns you want to manage. And here's why. We ingest 31 pounds of air every day compared to 8 pounds of water and 4 pounds of food. So in other words, 4 times more air than water and 8 times more air than food. We buy $50 billion worth of organic food every year to protect ourselves from contaminants, insecticides in food. We buy $20 billion a year of bottled water to protect ourselves from unknown contaminants in tap water. We're willing to pay for this. People want healthy homes, but we got a lot of risks to manage. In 1978 homes led in asbestos, and the leaky homes were exposed to high humidity coming in the summer, pest, pollen, outdoor smog and smoke, dust, and combustion gases. There are a lot of these factors that we have to manage, and we breathe a lot of air. So this is the risk management strategy we do in new homes. We do source control, fresh air with whole house and spot ventilation, and high capture filtration with a 5-inch filter, high MERV filter racks versus the 1-inch filter racks. And the ventilation also, the ventilation systems, the house ventilation will have a high MERV filter as well in there. So this is a tall order sometimes to do in existing homes, but we have to manage these risks. Chemicals VOCs, volatile organic compounds, formaldehyde, toxic mold and mustiness, dust, biological triggers, dust mites, pests, pollen, combustion gases, radon. And we have to inspect for lead and asbestos in existing homes before we do any work. And so here's a 1-inch filter rack. The majority of HVAC systems, the vast majority will look like this, often without a cover, which means they're pulling in dust and also less efficient. So we want 4 and 5-inch filter racks, which are hard to retrofit. They're pretty expensive to retrofit. And so when you put in a new system, that's the time to think about, can you switch to a 4 and 5-inch filter rack? The other thing that happens is we will have a atmospherically vented gas, water heater, and furnace. And then we'll switch the furnace to high efficient double ducted direct vent. And so you have direct vent furnace that you switch from a atmospheric vented furnace, and the 2 PVC pipes are added, and we close the flue, which was for both the furnace and the water heater. And now the flue is oversized for just the water heater. And so you might not be drafting the gases as much. So we found there can be problems backdrafting after we have an often atmospherically vented gas water heater. And so that can be a health safety issue. So risk management is to also switch to a direct or power vented water heater. This is a direct vent. You have air coming for combustion and then the combustion air going out. And here you use the room air for combustion, and the combustion air has a fan to power vent it out through a PVC pipe. So these are expensive to do and add on to the scope of work. If you only need the furnace and not the water heater, it's another $2,000, $2,500, whatever it may be. And so again, it's a risk factor in new homes. And the other thing is cooking itself. A lot of people like and prefer cooking with gas. As you start tightening up a home, and we have a lot of gas cooking, gas ovens, maybe a gas clothes dryer, all those appliances are just putting their emissions directly into the house. No flue, no exhaust vent for them. So, and the concentrations can increase where upgrades are improving air tightness. So more and more you want to switch to electric appliances as you're tightening up your homes. Induction cooking, heat pump clothes dryers or conventional electric clothes dryers. We just have to be thoughtful about all the risk factors once we tighten up homes. And of course, if we're going to tighten up the home, we want to have whole house ventilation as a strategy. The cheapest way is to use the bathroom exhaust fan, but it's least effective, and also it's pulling the makeup air. It's pulling the air back in through the construction assemblies. And so maybe in the summer, you're pulling hot, humid air into where it can reach a cold surface. So, balanced ventilation systems are so highly recommended over just exhaust only. And again, with the whole house ventilation systems, you have the same problems we have with the HVAC ductwork. We see kinks, and we see excessive lengths, and a lot of the same issues, and just a whole array of problems. And then what also happens is we're imposing a lot of expectations on homeowners who are not really adept at managing extra expectations. It's hard enough just to change the filter in a furnace, to change the filters in the whole house ventilation system, or to know to inspect the intake vents, make sure that you don't have things like, in this case, a hornet's nest that's been built up. Homeowners have been found to have systems that are really robust, balanced, ERV or HRV, heat recovery ventilator or enthalpy recovery ventilation systems, completely not working or substantially not working for years because they just don't know to check. So persistence is a real challenge with whole house ventilation. And persistence is important if the air tightening has really been effective. And the last thing I'll mention about indoor air quality is a lot of people put in these super exhaust range hoods, bigger is better, and those range hoods can pull in all sorts of contaminants in the house, or they can pull in backdraft from combustion appliances. They can pull in moisture in the house. So you really need makeup air with the systems that are 400 CFM or greater. And you also want to switch to high capture filtration, and that is more effective at removing cooking emissions at much, much lower airflow. One more thing is radon. The concentration of radon gases might be acceptable, but then when you tighten the house up, it might be extra. Air tightening might be something where you have to watch out for the radon. So the risk management strategy in regions with high radon risk or to ensure radon test is performed after significant energy upgrades. Radon tests should be done in high risk regions anyway, but just a simple add-on. So this is the minefield for risk management laid out. The enclosure will affect affordability, health, comfort, durability, as will HVAC and indoor air quality. And in addition, they will affect safety, usually from combustion safety issues. So this is a lot of risk factors that have to be managed. So how do we navigate those minefields? That's a lot of risk, a lot going on. And how do we do it in a way that we can scale to zero retrofits across the country? Now, in the short time I have left, I'm just going to give you a very quick overlay, some quick strategy pointers, but this is a much larger conversation. I just want to give you a sense that this is not insurmountable. There's a way to do this. It just takes good strategic planning to get to zero retrofits across the country. And the key principles are, again, you have to have proper sequencing. You can't afford all the waste and redos and risk factors. You have to get to optimize costs because cost factors are just too significant. You got to minimize friction. Homeowners can't manage a lot of friction, and you have to manage all the risks that we just showed you. It's asking a lot. I'll show you how I think we can do it. Okay, so it's step 1, 2, and 3. First thing you do is put some points on the board. Let's get people who are doing their existing home improvement projects today getting more of what they pay for with quality installation checklists that are already on the shelf ready to be used. I'll show you those. Step 2, bide some time while you develop a more comprehensive whole house strategy doing partial retrofits. Remember I said the comprehensive attic upgrade applies in all 8 climate zones. It's something everyone should be doing, and it can leverage the existing installation infrastructure to get it done. All right? This, coupled with the checklist from step 1, is something we can scale very quickly, and then give us some time to get to the whole house retrofit, step 3, where we finally get to the advanced wall systems and manage the risk factors and the health factors that come along for the ride. So here's the number of home upgrades done. This is the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University. This is one recent study, and essentially there are 14+ million energy-related projects that are being done annually, and the cost of those upgrades on an annual basis is about $62 billion. So Americans are doing a lot of energy-related projects. Can we help them get more bang for the buck? Yes, we can. The last thing before I left, I barely finished this before I left, was home improvement expert. We assembled checklists for energy enclosure upgrades, heating and cooling, hot water heating, and the fresh air system. Does that look familiar? Those 3 challenges we just talked about. So if you're doing any upgrades on any of these projects, attic air sealing, basement wall insulation, frame wall insulation, this is the checklist for you. This is a sample for attic air sealing insulation because, again, I'm a big fan of this. Is something we could do everywhere. And the way the checklists work is on the front page, you have the basic benefit of doing attic air sealing and insulation and other related measures that need to be taken into account when you do the attic air sealing. Then comes the generic information for whatever project you may do, enclosure, heating, hot water, fresh air. Why a home improvement expert checklist? What you can do when you're ready to do more, and tips for hiring a contractor, just basic information for every homeowner. Then comes the important message about sequencing, making sure we educate homeowners. There's a critical strategy for how we manage improving our house. There's some things we do first, second, third, and fourth. And it looks just like what I showed you, safe and durable, fresh air, moisture control, draft-free, thermal comfort, and anytime do the efficient upgrades. So this is basically sequencing people, if they want to read this, expert guidance how to manage your house. And then you turn the page over and you have the checklist. This is the attic air sealing checklist. So this is general conditions for contractors that they have to apply to all the codes and standards and so forth. So you want that on any checklist a contractor uses. Then what they do to prepare for attic air sealing and installation, what they do to install it with quality installation, best practices, then the commissioning before they hand it off to you, things that need to be done, and then the sign off at the bottom. So they're accountable to the checklist. The whole concept of this is good guy contractors have a basis for getting higher price points because they're using the certified checklist from the US EPA or the US DOE for how you get quality work. And we're going to do the checklist. If the other guys are not, you don't know what you're getting. So it empowers quality contractors to get what they deserve and to invest in doing quality work. And it gives a homeowner a tool to access quality contractor work because I have this checklist as an advocate for them to get work done properly. So it's really so simple, so easy. And there's so many concomitant interests that would help promote this. You can create a whole movement around getting these checklists done. But please recognize, we cobble these together, but they need to be more and more vetted with all the industry groups because we want them to buy into this. So the ASHRAE and the American Air Barrier Association and all the all the appliance groups, we want all of them to be part of this and to make sure we don't have poison pills, to make sure that we don't have any excessive requirements or any gaps in what we require. This is just the first foray into giving really good guidance. These are a really great first step, but it's a work in progress. When I left, I know it needed many more steps. It needs almost a collective impact process leadership to get these out to market. I'm very frustrated that just sitting there at DOE. This is something we could do right now. And if we got to 7% of the 14 million upgrades, got them using the checklist, we get 1 million homes with quality installation. And you've seen the data on the horror story on the lack of quality installation. And by 2030, that could be tens of millions of homes. The pros of doing this simple points of the board approach is ultra low cost and ultra low friction. And it's a individual measure risk reduction by ensuring it's being installed to quality standards and more likely to get the full savings, energy savings, makes quality trades more competitive, empowers consumers at transaction to be their own advocates, and it's appropriate in all climates. The cons are it's only incremental energy savings, not whole house. There's no comprehensive risk reduction and proper sequencing is not ensured. So it's just points on the board. Here's what we could do right now to help American homeowners almost overnight get quality work that will have less risk. Okay, the attic upgrade is part two. Okay, partial retrofit. Everywhere in the country, attic upgrades make tremendous sense. You have the greatest temperature differential between the attic and the home than you do between outside and inside because of the high summer temperatures. You have a constant stack effect pushing pressure up against the attic. You're missing air barriers there constantly. You're missing air sealing there on a regular basis. You're missing eave insulation and baffles, attic HVAC losses, and like I said, applies to all climates. So 2 options. One, stay with the vented attic and pull back the insulation or get rid of it, put in air barriers, eave baffles, all the air sealing, and put the insulation to IECC 2021. Option 2, convert to an unvented attic with closed cell spray foam. Now you don't have to worry about the air barriers, the eave baffles, the air sealing. And as an additional scope of work, I would, if there are attic ducts up there, I would add sealing the ducts. And if it's a really hot climate, maybe it's a good time to throw in some shade screens in south and west windows. But we can bundle this package and put it out to market, leveraging the existing insulation contractor infrastructure that's out there and creating them as partners and additional revenue for them to make American households better. It's a good partial solution. And I'll show you how it can work seamlessly with the final whole house solution. But first, the pros: low cost and friction, some risk reduction, significant meaningful energy savings, but not whole house energy savings, It leverages existing insulation infrastructure. It's a very simple transaction to do all this if it's bundled versus pieces, or trying to quality control the contractor to do all that on your own. And it's appropriate in all climates. The cons are partial energy savings, and some risks remain, some significant risks remain in some situations. So that brings us to what we do for a whole house retrofit, getting to zero, and how we do it cost effectively. And this is going to be based on Energy Sprung program that's been watching through Europe and a little bit of a start here in the US. And what you do here is you have a whole solution for how consultants come to your house that can contract and both finance a deep retrofit in one meeting. They have the leasing empowerment to enforce, they have the ability to do all the house assessment all in one meeting. It's very quick. And then what they do, if they sign you on, they use a drone to laser image the house and get effective CAD drawings that go to a factory to produce new wall panels. And the way Energy Sprung does it, also roof panels. More about roof panels in a second. And then offsite, they manufacture the wall panels and the roof panels, and also this little orange piece is a core. The whole house ventilation, the high performance heat pumps, all the things that are new today that should be in existing homes are all put in a single core, and all that can be done in 10 days. Really little friction. Where I go nuts is when you put a whole new roof on top of the existing roof, now I'm creating all sorts of challenges from my lens. You're increasing the existing roof load bearing capacity. Maybe the structure is not going to be enough. I mean, just adding a solar system will require the structural engineer to verify the 6 pound per square foot live load can be handled. You're replacing the existing roof and you may not need to replace it. All the plumbing vents, air vents, flues all have to be redone that go through the roof. All the exterior trim and gutters all have to be redone. It's a tremendous amount of work to replace the roof. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. But I would do the research, I would do the analysis, but I want to test a second option, which is only do the walls. And if you've done the step 2, you've done the comprehensive attic upgrade, you're already done. If not, do the comprehensive attic upgrade with the walls in one step, or do the unvented attic. Either way, I'm a big fan of unvented attics, so I push for that. And then you save all these costs for increasing the roof load capacity, for replacing the roof, reconfiguring plumbing, air vents, flue heights, trim, gutters, all that goes away. So that's my recommendation is this option looks awfully strong. I need to pull numbers together, verify this, but this is what I'm recommending. Let's talk about the core. Basically, they're putting in a high efficiency heat pump, high efficiency instantaneous heat pump water heating, whole house ventilation, and renewable energy balancer system all go in this one core package that you see made in a plant like this. So they make these and attaches to the house. So all the panels in the core just get appended to the house, like adding a new skin. So you pull off the existing cladding, you pull off the existing windows, and then you attach all these new panels to the house. And you get 50 to 80% reduction. If you include solar, you get you up to 80. And there are the panels being attached to the house. And there's what the house looked like before. And this is what it looks like after. There are dozens of projects that are in the portfolio of Energy Sprung. Here's your core. Here's your new cladding system compared to the old one. And this also includes a solar roof system as well. So 10,000 retrofits have been completed in 7 countries, predominantly Europe, and a little bit North America has just been working on multifamily housing. RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, has some contracts with DOE, but there are thousands more planned. It's moving fast. Costs have come down 50% since they've been perfecting this whole automated system and systems built solutions and advanced digital technology to scan in the field. So 50+% cost reduction and 50% energy savings doing this in Netherlands. They're trying to bring this learning curve benefit to Europe and now the US. So all these steps go away. In one step, you get insurable and safe. You go all electric. You get the ventilation system. You get the control layers. You get the airtight construction. You get passive house level thermal comfort, and you already have the HVAC system being replaced as part of this. One stop, all the 5 steps done in one time. And the core principles is you have an energy performance guarantee, 10-day timetable. I think 7 days without the roof is what I would guesstimate. Affordability is the investments financed by the guaranteed energy savings. So the monthly impact on cash flow for the homeowner is minimal. And the attractiveness is that the packages must be attractive to the occupants aesthetically. And I'll also mention what they've learned in this process is people really want new kitchens and new bathrooms more than they want a new high performance skin. So what they also have done is package new kitchens and bathrooms at the same time with all this financing and really elegant, simple transactions, and really creating a lot of interest to when you do that. So the pros of this advanced systems built walls plus core, it's a comprehensive risk management. And you saw the minefields that are completely scary. When you go through and look at all the pictures I show, you're locking in proper sequencing. It's really cost effective. You're paying for it with the incredible energy savings. You have zero ready performance. You have advanced systems building being leveraged for tremendous quality advantages and risk management. All climates, well, mostly cold climates is where I start, and hot, really hot climates. But it's higher cost and friction, so we need steps 1 and 2 to give us a bridge to be ready to scale to this whole house approach. So there you go. I'm exhausted. Do we scare everyone on the call or not? We'll find out, but I'll hand it back to you. Mike?
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate the content. For those who aren't aware, I mean, this was the first time we've ever done an existing home seminar through Housing 2.0. So this was kind of cool to see all this fresh new content. And believe me, Sam, there were questions coming in during, and we're going to get to those. I want to make sure to put into the chat that people can still send in questions, and we're going to get to those as well. So let's start with something that was mentioned kind of early in the seminar. Mohammed wanted to know, please tell us the reason for, quote, never audit. What audits should we stay away from and why?
Not staying away from audits, staying away from the word audit. In last webinar on translating value, I went through the incredible power of words. And I also mentioned that words are an incredible deal. They're free. If a good word will change behavior versus a bad word, and it doesn't cost you anything, why are we not using the good words? I gave an example last week, or the last webinar, of the Patagonian toothfish. Was this amazing seafood found in South America, had great texture, great flavor, a great taste. It was an amazing seafood, but it rotted on the shelves. People didn't want to buy Patagonian toothfish. So the sea merchants went back to the table and they huddled up together and they did one change with words. They changed the name to Chilean sea bass. And the fish was so exciting to the American seafood eating public, it almost went extinct. But from some draconian measures that were taken to protect the species, it would have just no longer been in existence, just by changing the word. Words matter. And I always do a survey in my audiences. I say in my audiences, how many of you want to be audited? Not a single hand goes up, go figure. No one wants to be audited. It's a negative word. It doesn't inject any emotion or interest. So if words are free, why not energy assessment or energy checkup? We bring our cars and our bodies in for checkups because they're so important to us. We want to make sure that we catch any problems early. And that's all we're doing with an energy audit. We're doing an energy checkup. We're protecting the greatest value, the greatest asset of most households is their home. And isn't it important to make sure it's working right and working with less potential moisture damage and comfort issues and health issues and wellness issues? This is an easy sell. but we try to sell an audit because we're stuck on that technical term. We've got to be thinking more about how do we translate value to the end user. So that's why I say never use audit.
All right. And a quick plug for that previous seminar that was on April the 4th. You can find the recording of that on the Green Builder Media YouTube channel. Had a question come in from Ryan, and it's an interesting question too, because it's one that I talked a little bit about in the blog that I wrote in advance of this seminar. He wanted to know, given the complexities of projects, just in general, and difficulties working with homeowners, how is it going to be possible to scale high-performance home retrofits?
The way you scale is you remove choice. No, housing is so difficult because we over-customize it and give way too many choices to the homeowner. We frustrate them, we overwhelm them. They're almost in tears at the sales center trying to make all the decisions about counters and cabinets and paints and trim and lights and hardware. They're out of their minds. And so you come in with a package. The package will do this whole new skin, a whole new ventilation system and a comfort system, and all this new protection. And many times, as it's done in Europe, it includes a whole solar energy system to get you to zero. And it just comes, it will be this package. You only have 2 or 3 different choices for the cladding that will go on the house as part of that skin. And either you do it or you don't. If you do it, it has a lease payment, and the payment should be less than the energy savings that you'll have every month. And so, and it's tied to certain houses and certain geometry, and you do those first. There are millions of houses in this country that have fairly simple geometry and boxes that are easy to be retrofitted with this approach. But if you want something more customized, you want more choices, you want to be, then you go with the other approach that might cost you 5x more cost. So you have a choice to say 5x of cost, have less choices, mass customization, and get your house virtually as good or better than new homes in 10 days. It's just an amazing choice. So the way we do it is friction and cost. That's the way you penetrate the market. You look at any technology app or any new innovation going to market, that's the only way we can get there. Going from an early adopter to a mainstream user, you're not going to cross the chasm if you don't address those 2 factors. So that's the best answer I can give to that question, which is a great question. Because most people try to sell insulation, windows, and try to sell heating and cooling. They're out of their minds when they go to the individual house. When they come in, we got this package, we do it this price, it's bundled, we come in, we're out, here's a leasing agreement. That's the way it all happens. That's how they've gotten to millions of homes.
So we have other great questions to get to as well, such as this one from Sandy. Wanting to know, don't you open yourself up to potential pest infiltration with drainage openings?
With drainage opening?
Yes, and I wish I had more to go off of than just that. Now I know Sandy is still in attendance, so she may be able to send me some context to the question, but she's talking about drainage openings.
She maybe was talking about the trench drain in the basement. Is the only thing I can be thinking about.
Could be. Hold on. She may have sent something in to me. Related to siding, she says.
Oh, no. Yeah, basically, they're at the bottom of the air gap. That's a great question. You were right. You predicted it. So thank you, Sandy. And it's good to know it's drainage behind the cladding. There's a, let's say you have a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch or 1 inch, 1.5 inch gap between the cladding and the weather-resistant barrier. At the very bottom, you put in it's a plug that lets air through, but not insects. So it's an insect control plug at the very bottom. So the air can go through. You get the, you have air balance that allows for gravity and water to drain, but insects can't get through it. So that's what they do. And there's anything there that where the insects can go they probably can get there anyway with the existing cladding systems without the airspace.
Question from our friend Zoran up Canada. It's a great kind of general question too that I think is something that maybe people don't really think about, but is something I think everybody will be interested in. He wants to know, what is commonly measured in regards to IAQ?
Not much. There's a lot of devices you can buy, and I think that the sensors are the weak link. The biggest value of a lot of the sensors and controls, the FUBOTs and all the other systems that are out there, are that they'll be able to detect when something's very different from a baseline at a significant level, CO2 or particulates or CO or VOCs. There are a bunch of things that they can measure. The precision of the measure is less important than the fact that they can detect a jump or a level that's way excessive beyond a reference point. And you don't know precisely what the numbers are, but there are more and more you see, there are more controls and ways to measure indoor air quality in your house. And they'll indicate green for healthy, yellow for caution, red for stop, take care of the problem, and they'll flag problems. So it's less the metric than it is the ability to indicate an excessive condition that needs to be looked at. But the measurements, the air quality sensors are still a work in progress to get them where they need to be to precisely measure. But to at least signal a problem, I think they're good enough right now. So that's what I would look for. So the actual units are not important as much as just seeing you're in a safe zone versus unsafe when it comes to health.
Well, I interpret his question, Sam, as to what is it measuring. So you started to list things off: CO2, CO, VOCs. So what would be in that?
They're measuring dust particles. The size of the dust particles are measuring concentration of CO2, concentration of CO, of VOCs, formaldehydes. They're just measuring those contaminants, and they have the technology is able to sense their presence and the amount of their presence and concentrations, and that's what it does. And the metrics to me are less important than whether it's excessive or not.
Gotcha. Okay. Wanted to get to a question from Judy. She wanted to know if you have any suggestions. And by the way, Judy's question reminds me of something that we used to run into with the action groups. Any suggestions for exterior walls that are exposed when shower surrounds are removed in northern climates in older homes, and there's likely no air sealing there at all?
Wow. Well, again, if there's no insulation behind the shower, it must be a pretty cold shower in a cold climate. But if you're going to insulate it, my suggestion is spray foam, closed cell spray foam. Again, that way you basically are mitigating the vapor flow path because it's an air barrier. It fills the space, so it's less risk of quality installation. It will completely fill whatever odd spaces are there. And the key thing to recognize is that it's a manufacturing process in the field. You mix on 2 parts, and it's supposed to mix at the right amounts, at the right weather conditions, the right temperature. And you have a guy in a moon suit trying to do this precisely. So you have to make sure you have a good quality contractor do the work, because sometimes if the mixture's off, it will shrink over a short amount of time. You'll have air gaps that can lead to vapor flow pathways to a cold surface. So it just means it's not bulletproof. It still requires a very experienced contractor, good quality control. But the only thing I can think to do in that case is put in spray foam in the assembly behind the shower. You have a lot of pipes and other things going on. Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah, I want to give kudos, Judy, to whoever is taking these showers off of the exterior walls in northern climates and finding somewhere else to put them. That's really helpful.
Yeah, the design principle we teach in the design classes, we don't put plumbing on outside walls. So.
Right. How many times have we covered that one in action groups? Oh, good times. Hey, we got another question from Alan, and I can feel the passion of his question as he sent this in. So I'm going to modify it a little bit. He says that dealing with homeowners can be a challenge because they typically will they'll look at price rather than value as a metric. And so that results in just a race to the bottom. And we really need, in his opinion, he says, we really need buy-in from the renovation industry to really pull this off. But his question is, how can an unregulated industry be held accountable?
Well, I'm not sure it's unregulated. I mean, the building departments are going to be involved and oversee they're responsible to oversee any kind of major work like this. And so, and then you're required to do things to electric code, to plumbing code, to mechanical codes. So it's not like there's no regulations. So I'm not sure that applies, but I will tell you, there's a huge benefit when you build something in a plant with manufacturing quality assurance methods and lean construction methods and automated equipment and lots of optimization to get the details right and mitigate a lot of the field conditions, whether workers who may be less trained or less likely not feeling good that day. If it's just a really systems built situation, normal oversight from the building department with the field assembly versus construction, I think we're in pretty good shape. What the big advantage of the system is that you're assembling the panels in the field and all the hard work getting really, really high quality control layers and finishes and details are all done in the plant. So it's going to, I think the risks are so dramatically lower. And like I said, you still have the oversight of the building departments. So I'm pretty comfortable that it's been done in so many homes in Europe. I doubt they have any more oversight than we have here. So.
Now that also assumes for a second, Sam, that the renovation and retrofit is extensive enough to require a permit of some sort, right?
Well, the one I'm talking about, the whole house would definitely require construction.
Yeah. Okay. So another question from Zoran. Now he wanted to remind us that the requirement for net zero homes in Canada is 1.5 ACH 50. So based off of that context, his question is, can existing homes reach 1.5 ACH 50?
Yes. If we do the wall assemblies the way we showed today with the energy sprung similar system, if we completely air seal the attic, the only places left are the basement. Basements are generally pretty tight if they're concrete block or poured concrete. If it's a stone basement, it's going to require other upgrades anyway to make it moisture proof. So, and then once you're below grade, it's mostly the diffusion coming through the slab. That's a culprit with moisture transfer. Once you've sealed any cracks and holes. So yes, we can get existing homes. The key is that extra skin on the walls. And I think the unvented attic is a sweet spot for getting them airtight. So if the attic airtight, the walls are airtight, just manually the basements, I think we can manage to hit that target. But it's good to know that Housing 2.0 recommendation, 1.5 is right aligned with the Canadians. So there we go.
Final call for questions, by the way. We have one here from Andrew. He says, how would you address a stone-clad enclosure? Now, this home was built in the 80s, and it's not cut stone, it's not fake stone. This is a stone-clad enclosure.
Great question. And I'm glad that one came up because it's an important discussion. there are some historic buildings where this stuff doesn't apply, right? We're not going to put cladding these new lowy windows over an historic building, and so there are buildings where you can't really get it to zero. And the perfection is the enemy of the good. So what we do is we have solutions for the masses, an 80% solution for 80% of the housing that's out there. But for housing that has some very special stone cladding, or it's historic housing, or has some other special, really, they put in some new hardy plank siding, whatever it may be. There are going to be cases where you just can't do that system. What you have to know is that there's no way you can do the walls unless you do pull the siding. So you're limited because you have to have control layers before you insulate. It's just a prerequisite. You cannot take the risk of having the problems. So you need a way to get control layers. If you can't do the control layer, you can't do the upgrade. If you can't get control layers for the walls, you can't upgrade the walls. The great news is you can always do the attic upgrade. You can put in the new windows. If it's not a historic building, you can put in much more efficient equipment, and you can put in much more efficient components. And there's enough other things you can do. So instead of getting 100% to zero ready or something close to zero ready, you're at 40% or 50%. And that might be what you have to live with. Now, it shouldn't be we have to do draconian, incredibly costly things now, and keep pushing that. We need the 80% solutions all we should go after, but there'll be people who own homes. They'll say, you know what, I'll take off the plaster walls on the exterior and I'll retrofit from the inside, and then you can do it. It's like I say, it is a huge undertaking that would never pay itself back in terms of the energy benefit, but the comfort, the health, and the other aspects have enough value for that particular homeowner, then you do it. But the short answer is, in many cases, you just do as much as you can, which is why step 2, the attic upgrade, is something you can do almost everywhere.
All right, we do have another question that came in from Tiffany. Any recommendations for getting started with a manufacturing systems built wall plus core in the US? You've talked a lot about the examples in Europe and this sort of thing. How do we get this going in the US? And how would you recommend attaching these whole wall systems to an existing structure?
That's a whole, the attachment's just a detailed solution. Basically, they're getting them bolted to the framing that's already there. And so I'm not sure the actual detail itself and where they insert clips and how they bolt it in and so forth. But you can see basically they drop them in place and they have brackets for attaching them. But in terms of how you would start such a system here in the US is it takes a big investment. What they did in Netherlands to start was the local governments got together with this visionary group that wanted to do this. They got the funding from the local government to do the plant and commit to a certain number of projects, which would make the plant viable the day it was ready to open. So it requires a number of moving parts. You need programs that will lock in demand. You need financial partners who will do the leasing packages. It's just a lot of work. You got to assemble all the pieces. And there's some detailed reports on Energy Sprong and how they did it. I will refer people to get those details from there just to get a sense of what worked in Europe. What can be done here might be a better way, or a more simple way, but they got it done. So we know it can be done. But the simple answer is somehow you have to create a complete solution where you have the financing, manufacturing, and the demand creation all bundled together so that it's just set up for success.
All right. Good one to end on there, Sam. That does conclude our seminar series, but if you missed any of them, and we referenced some previous ones throughout, I have good news. You can view them without a password on Green Builder Media's YouTube channel. Now, our next Housing 2.0 related webinar is going to take place in about 4 weeks. The specific date is Wednesday, May 29th. It's going to happen at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to hear from Brandon Weiss of Devel as he discusses zero energy modular homes. Thank you so much for attending today. Thank you once again to Schneider Electric, to Jinko Solar, and Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions for their generous sponsorship of the Housing 2.0 program. Until next time, I hope that you have a wonderful Cinco de Mayo, Mother's Day, Memorial Day. Summer is just around the corner. All those things and more. Thank you so much again for attending today. We'll see you again in about 4 weeks. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.